Thanks everyone for joining today's webinar, Leading with Empathy, the role of psychological safety in modern leadership. So my name's David Clarkson, the Head of Marketing at Testgrid, and we also have Abby Hunt.
How you going? No, thanks for having me today, David. Sorry about the confusion. I'm waiting on him to start. He's waiting on me to come on the screen. So yeah, not a good start. Sorry, guys. We'll make up for it.
Oh, don't worry. I was humming and all sorts. I was doing my.
I was seeing you. I was like, what's he waiting for?
Just once your camera was off, I was like, all right, okay, what's going on? Great start. I love it. All right. Okay, cool. Just a bit about Testgrid. So we're a psychometric assessment and HR technology company. We were founded in 1999, and we help businesses make smarter, faster, and fairer talent acquisition and development decisions. Before I go any further, I'd like to welcome to country. So our meeting is being held on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. And as per usual with our webinars, if you want to share what nation you're coming from today, you can do that in the chat. So just take a look at what we're up to today and what we're going to be talking about. Really the format is going to be, I'll kind of share some stats, and then it's really a kind of question and answer with Abby and a bit of a discussion. However, I think Abby's going to be talking a lot more than me. So first off, just looking at the impact of poor psychological safety. Safe work estimated this around $6 billion per year in lost productivity, and this is due to absenteeism or presenteeism and other productivity losses. One thing to note is psychological injuries often result in longer absenteeism than physical injuries, amplifying the impact of psychological safety and the impact on businesses. So it's not only a legal obligation, it's a strategic approach to enhancing overall productivity and employee well-being. Just looking at some stats from Gallup. We've got sorry, I'm still giggling about the start. If a team's psychological safety moves from a 3 out of 10 to a 6 out of 10, we'll see a 27% reduction in turnover, 40% reduction in safety incidents, and a 12% increase in productivity. And looking at the impact of leadership, so only 26% of leaders create psychologically safe environments for their teams. So this is seen as quite a significant challenge for organisational leadership, which we're going to be chatting about today. So I'm going to put away the boring PowerPoint, and I'm just going to hand over to Abby. And before I do, I just want to give a bit of an introduction to Abby. Abby is a counselling and psychologist and co-founder. Counselling psychologist and co-founder of Data Drives Insights. She specialises in supporting organisations, teams, and families, and particularly following workplace tragedies. Her experience has inspired her to work proactively in building psychological safety to prevent such incidents in the future. And Abby brings extensive experience in organisational psychology in fostering safe, high-performing workplace environments. She's passionate about enabling leaders and teams to develop cultures of trust and safety for better outcomes and well-being.
Thanks, David.
And she also rocks up late to webinars.
I was just thinking that was a prime example of psychological safety when I'm biting my tongue going, should I message him going, what are we waiting for? Are we waiting for more people in the room? What's going on? But I chose not to say anything. That's my psychological safety for you. Funny.
I need to make a more psychologically safe environment then. Alrighty, I'm going to stop sharing and we'll just start basically bombarding you with questions.
Great. Look,
Alrighty.
can I also
On you go.
make a request of people? Like,
Yep.
I'm fully aware that some people may not have access to their cameras, but I can tell you, as someone who does a lot of webinars and public speaking, it's really hard to speak to blank screens. So if you are comfortable and prepared to show your face on camera, it would be awesome. If you're really against it, then I will respect that as well.
Nice. Not done that before.
Disabled. Okay, no worries. It says our cameras are disabled for attendees. No, sorry, I should have checked that, but yeah.
Yeah, no worries. I'm maybe trying to fix that as we go. Alrighty. So just going to crack on with the first question then. So what exactly is psychological safety, and why is it increasingly recognised as vital in modern Australian workplaces?
Right. So, so David, you can work on the cameras and the voice and the background, and I can speak about this sort of stuff forever. So, you might have to cut me off at a certain point.
Yeah, no worries.
So, I just wanted to give a little bit of a background, a little bit more, just to let you know my background around. So I'm just assume I'm super good to look at. Yeah, got distracted me. So my background for the first 10 years was working with teams after there'd been a fatality or there'd been a workplace accident that was pretty major and had caused a fatality, or through an employee taking their own lives. And I would always debrief teams afterwards and work with families. And what was always very distressing was people would say things to me afterwards, such as, I knew that piece of equipment wasn't quite right, or I knew that my colleague was struggling, but I didn't know how to have the conversation, or we were all working so much overtime that I think my colleague was really fatigued and he wasn't able to, speak up and share that, what he was feeling, etc. And so what that sparked in me is again what we're going to talk about today, which is psychological safety, which is the willingness to take a risk and actually be able to raise issues with other people that we work with. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the distinction between psychological safety and psychosocial risk, and I thought I'd get that out of the way early, because it's a bit of a buzzword for some organisations and some places, but so many. I'll turn the pings off. But there's also it is important to get the distinction. So I'm going to share my screen with you just on a particular slide that I like to talk through with people. You don't want to look at my emails. So as you can see down the bottom here, psychosocial risk are the work conditions, right? So it's something about the work and the work environment that impacts on our overall health. So it could be things like whether I feel that my job is secure, whether I feel as though I'm clear about what's expected of me in my role. Because you can imagine, if I'm not clear about what my role is or whether I'm going to have a contract come next week, it starts to spark this insecurity and fear. And when I feel that fear, it impacts on my overall mental health, which is that psychological safety, therefore my willingness to speak up. So it's things like, do I work in an isolated environment? Is there bullying? Is there discrimination? Is there sexual harassment? And those are a lot of things that we hear within the media, and that a lot of us will have experienced as well. When those psychosocial risks are present, it brings us into an area of concern. And so we become disengaged, we feel full of fear, and that's when often poor behaviour can come out. When those psychosocial risks are not there, so I'm feeling very secure about my job, I feel I feel happy and connected to my team, etc., then it brings me to neutral. It doesn't lead to high performance. So the secret sauce, which is what people often haven't quite connected the dots yet, though, is psychological safety. So when I feel safe to say, hey, I'm not clear about this piece of work, or when people say, I've got a new idea and I know it's a little bit different to what you all think, or when I can freely say, I've made an error and I just need to come clean. When there's that feeling of safety to take risks with each other, that's the secret sauce that brings you to high performance. And so that's the distinction. And I hope that kind of answers that initial question, David.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got a very recent example. A member of our team would set up HubSpot in such a way, so we use that for leads within our department. So free trials and things like that are all seen as SQL leads, and some of them had been going into spam, and it'd been happening for a while. So if anyone's trying to get into contact with us, particularly about video interviewing, and we didn't get back to you, that's why. And the person who not only identified that, then had the courage to actually speak up and say, listen, this is what's been happening, and they were in charge of that, and then were able to then follow up with those companies. So I thought that was quite a good example of psychological safety, and they were able to put their hand up straight away.
Yeah, and if you all kind of think about that for yourselves, and as I run these, I always ask people to just think about it. You don't have to share it with anyone, and obviously we don't have that function on this chat at the moment anyway.
Yeah.
Think about for yourself, like in the last 24 hours, where's there been an example where I felt something, or something agitated me, or I didn't like something, or I had a new idea, but I chose not to say it.
Yeah.
And that's just something to consider. And why didn't we say it? And it's usually because of fear of offending, or I just don't want a conflict. I always have people, usually males, I'm going to stereotype here, but usually say, well, I wanted to say something to my wife, but I chose not to because I didn't want it to become an argument. And that's normal. That's normal.
Yeah, we're trained to do that in so many different ways, from high school, feeling silly to put your hand up and ask a question.
Yeah.
Feeling like you should know it already. Yeah, it's interesting. Alrighty, my next question. So we've heard about the legislative changes around psychosocial hazards, and has this got anything to do with psychological safety?
Yeah, 100%. So just to be clear, so a lot of you, will have heard of the ISO 45003 standard. That's a global reference for around psychosocial risk. So it's mitigating those psychosocial hazards. Now, it's not fully legislative yet, but we're definitely heading down that path. And I can give you an example of, I won't give you the nitty gritty, but two of the clients that I work with have actually just settled outside of court in the last 2 months for historical situations that happened. One happened 10 years ago. That was the psychosocial risks were not managed, and it impacted on their psychological health. So how we function, and it can lead to obviously more deeper concerns around wellness. So it's not a fully what would you call it's not mandatory, but it aligns perfectly with the work health and safety laws, and they're totally interconnected. So the wave is coming. That's what I say to people. So whether you're coming to this webinar as from a compliance approach that says, all right, we've got to start making sure we're ticking that box, that's a great start. But I also want you guys to be thinking about psychological safety and psychosocial risk. It's the key factor that promotes high performing teams, and therefore productivity and a lot of those pain points that a lot of you will have.
Absolutely. So it's a mutually beneficial strategy, essentially. So compliance point of view, and also productivity. And then we hope those leads will convert that we missed the other day. So how does psychological safety impact employee well-being, productivity, and overall organisational culture?
Yeah. So there was a study done, I think it's called the Aristotle Project, and it surveyed, and I can't forget all the numbers now, but some ridiculous amount of number of subjects were asked, what are the key ingredients that create high performance? and over above all was psychological safety. There are other things such as, job role clarity, leadership connection, but in terms of psychological safety, is there a willingness and a culture within our team to actually speak up and speak up with safety? Can I show up as my true self there without fear of judgment and blame? And so that is just the key ingredient of psychological safety and engagement. When people feel safe to be themselves, they're engaged. When people feel fear of judgment or ridicule or shot down or fear, I mean, the amount of times I've heard people say, oh, I couldn't speak up, else I would have got a window seat home. That's the terminology that people will use. So and that still happens. And actually, a lot of it happens at that team level. So a lot of you, I'm assuming, who have signed up for today's webinar will be leaders in your organisation. And I'll say to you that it is a lot about team psychological safety. So this does not all fall back onto you all as leaders. It's about how do we create a psychologically safe team so that we're all supporting one another and creating that culture. So a lot of people that will say, I love my manager, but if I know I'm on shift with, person X and Y, I'm not coming. I'll go, wow, why not? Well, I always get the bad, jobs, or, we don't share the workload evenly. Have you had a discussion about that? I've tried, I got shot down, so there's no point. So people are more likely to leave an organisation if there's low psychological safety, because they're not engaged and they're not feeling safe.
Interesting. I'm just on the from a culture perspective, something that comes to mind is like an old university professor talking about synergy. Synergy used to be a buzzword, but it can always, and it was teams working together. And also, I've got a work in marketing, so it's all to do with creativity, coming up with ideas and things like that. So somebody putting their hand up it's extremely important, because somebody coming up with something or just sharing a thought, and then someone else within the team building on that is so crucial. So I always think of that when it comes to culture and creating that safe and work environment. What's the
collaboration? It's innovation.
What's the language again? Is it the silence? Something to be silence. Sorry, I can't quite remember the terminology, but organizational silence or something. I can't quite remember.
So basically, if we all bite our tongues, then we don't share ideas, then we're gonna be capped in terms of our potential. It kind of leads us into, when you're talking about culture, it's also you're talking a few things, David, around collaboration and innovation and bouncing ideas off each other. I was speaking at the Women in Leadership Summit yesterday in Perth, and I listened to an organisation that was a engineering organisation, and they have these things called ideas sandbox meetings, which is like, it's a parameter around, let's bounce ideas off each other, let's grow, let's play in this space of new ideas and innovation. And that was a really good strategy that worked for them, but it was permission to do that. But there still has to be an element of safety, psychological safety, for us to even take that risk. Because it could be, the voice that sits on the shoulder that says, yeah, but remember you put that idea out last time and it got totally shut down. So it reinforces that muscle to go, actually, maybe not. Don't go there.
Yeah, it really is a subject where, like you said at the start, you could talk about it for ages. Obviously, as an expert, you could talk about it and the impact of it. But I'm sure everyone that's on the webinar right now has got an experience. I mean, even if it's just like, the one I've always heard is, we tried that before. That's one as well. If it's a new idea. Anyway, I'll move on to my question, because I will keep talking. How does psychological safety play a role in creating inclusive and diverse workspaces, and why is this particularly crucial for Australian companies in 2024?
Yeah, I love this question. So tell me to shut up after a little while, because I'll probably talk for too long. So if Look, one of the best stories I had was meeting with a CEO in construction, and he was saying to me, he goes, "I'm wrapped. You know, we've hit our gender diversity target. We've got 33% female engineers, and look, you know, they do kind of come and go, and there's a bit of a turnover, and da 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 da." And I said, "Well, Carl, okay, well, you know, you've hit your quota, which is great, but how inclusive, you know, do people feel?" No, actually. So look, we've found a measure to be able to measure inclusivity, psychological safety, and those psychosocial risks within 3 minutes for a team. And so we're able to do that, and you know, we're able to actually drill into the nitty gritty and the results. And he was astounded. He's like, "Oh my gosh, like no wonder we've got a kind of revolving door of female employees, because they're not feeling psychologically safe to speak up, and we can't have that." So it allows you to kind of drill straight into the detail as to what areas need to shift and improve within that team. So I'll say the other thing around inclusivity and diversity, you can have really diverse teams that if there's no psychological safety, then it's untapped potential. The other side of the coin is you can have really high psych safety in a very non-diverse team, and you'll get capped with potential because it just ends up being groupthink. So the golden kind of standard is actually to have high diversity and psychological safety. But there's no point, this is me probably getting on my high horse now, there's no point striving for those. Look, it's a good start, but you know, yeah, we've hit the targets, diversity target, but if it's no safety, you're just going to have a revolving door, because people end up getting disengaged, and it's no good for anyone.
Yeah, and particularly those people within teams who can be defined, considered or diverse. Those are probably the ones that are a bit nervous to put their hand up.
Yeah. I've got an example of, and I share this one a lot if anyone's ever heard me speak before, but it's the one that just kind of fully describes it all. Bunch of occupational therapists, very multicultural team. They did the 3-minute pulse. They looked at the results, and the team were like, "Oh my gosh, there's like 80% of us that don't feel accepted for our differences. What's that about?" And this one brave, you know, white young male put his hand up and he said, "You know, look, I'm going to be honest, I don't know anything about the Muslim culture. And so I'm so fearful of offending you.
Yeah.
It's easier for me to avoid you." And for them, it just opened up this conversation, which was beautiful, because the thing is, psychological safety is invisible. You can't see it, but it does exist. So you've got to measure it regularly to be able to know what's happening within our team so we can discuss it.
Interesting. Yeah,
I think someone's got their hand up. I think Anastasia. I don't know if that's
I think there's
an old hand up, or whether there's a question. But feel free to put questions in the question box too.
Yeah, I've been seeing the chat. So, and
the other thing I might just note as well, just a quick one. You mentioned in your slide, David, before about the 3 to 6 out of 10. And it's just put in perspective that, like, most teams, so Amy Edmondson is the guru of psychological safety. She's a professor in Harvard, and we've collaborated, work. She's using a lot of our data to understand psych safety in Australia. But her research indicates that most teams operate at about a 3 out of 10 in psychological safety. So it's normal to be low, but it's not good. That's not good. We need it to be higher if we want to actually, you know, perform well.
Interesting. Yeah. I guess like there's obviously the assessment that we'll speak about. The reason we're data insights and Testgrid started talking is we recently partnered, and we have the PSI assessment that allows the to track psychological safety, which you'll be able to talk a lot more. But you can integrate that with Testgrid. One of the things I think of is like what other, so that is a great way of indicating psychological safety. But where my mind goes to is like, if you give, what are the indicators within a meeting, for example? Maybe it's if you ask the team a question and there's no answers, and everyone's quiet. I think often like, all right, here we go. Somebody's
yeah.
What's
So what are some of the indicators that it's low? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. I mean, if we just use an example of the meetings, like you know, and it's hard to know. I think there's a few people that have got their workplaces on their title. So you know, if you're working at a school and you're having like your staff meetings, and you know, often hear principals will say, or whoever's, you know, running the meetings, so often say, you know, I ask open questions. No one gives me a response. I even sit there in silence and wait for, it's always the usual people that kind of speak up, you know. So if there's silence, exactly. If, you know, as a leader, you might say, look, I think we should take this approach. What do others think? And if you're always getting agreement, then that might indicate as well that there's low psychological safety. So it's the way in which you ask questions. It might be, help me see some things that I'm not, you know, that I'm not seeing, because I can't see everything. So the thing with psychological safety is there's some, within your own teams, you are no doubt doing something, whether it's intentional or not. You know, you're doing something that impacts on the culture. You know, everyone does. So part of our measurement and then solution is when a team kind of identifies what's missing. So, for example, you know, our team really struggles, rates really low on feeling comfortable to share new ideas. So what do it then leads you to a very, very quick micro learning that allows the person to go, what is it that I'm doing that's contributing to this? But also, what's my view around sharing new ideas? And if my view is don't share on new ideas because they'll get shot down, if I continue to have that view, what's the impact going to be on this team and on this outcome? So look, I kind of deviated from your question there, David, but there's loads of things.
I'm completely derailing us. Don't worry, I've got a list of questions which I've in the interest of keeping some structure, please everyone keep throwing in your questions. We can see that there's those in the chat, and I'll just kind of rattle through mine. What I've tried to do with the questions for today is just look at some of the challenges within Australian businesses at the moment, and frame the questions around them, and some of the trends as well. So, for example, how can psychological safety support flexible and hybrid work models, helping employees feel connected and secure even when working remotely?
Yeah. So I know I keep talking about the measure, but I do this because I use it with every team that I work with, whatever industry, and it doesn't matter how big or small the team is. In saying that, you need to have at least 5 people in the team to kind of really get to the heart of it. But I always use it when I coach people, because and with teams, because it makes that invisible visible. So if we know, for example, that we've just put in, maybe the organisation has just put in a new wellness program, or they've just started flexible working hours, or they've changed, maybe there's been a restructure, there might have been a significant change that's happened. It's important to test it regularly. And when I say regularly, you're doing a pulse maybe every month or every second month, to know how those strategies are impacting on the culture of the team. Yeah. So, for example, one of the questions around psychosocial risk factors is, do I feel as though I have say over my work-life balance? Do I feel as though I have autonomy in my role? Am I trusted in my role? So you're able to identify of the team, and the team can see, let's see, we think, everyone says that they're happy with these new flexible working hours, but interesting, the data's indicating people are still feeling as though they're not having much autonomy over their, decision making over their priorities and roles. So let's unpack that and figure out what that means in relation to this new initiative that we've put forward. So it just brings issues to the table rather than, staying invisible. And it pushes that responsibility and accountability back to the team, not to the leader. Yeah. Leaders play an influence, definitely, but this is about team accountability.
Interesting. So it's not just not just if you've got a team working from home, then it's kind of giving all those people accountability, and it's certainly a challenge in modern business. I hear a lot of challenges around collaboration. Working from home.
Great example was a team I worked with. Some were in PNG, some were in, majority were in Brisbane. One of the employees was in Chile. And they did the PSI, the measure, they looked at the results, and it was said, like, I'm going to say 90%, just to make it easy, 90% of the team felt super connected with each other, and one person didn't. And so what was funny is that a lot of the people were like, oh, Jane, let's just say Jane's in Chile, so sorry you feel disconnected, we're going to really try harder. And Jane said, look, it's actually not me. I feel really connected in this team. And another lady, she was quite courageous to say this. She goes, look, I'm going to be honest, that was me. Even though I work closely with you all in the team, I do feel a little bit disconnected from having a meaningful connection with you all. So that allowed them to go, oh my gosh, like, that's great. Now that we know this, we can make a bit more effort. And she was able to express why she felt a little bit on the outer. So we can often make assumptions, and I suppose, again, this highlights bringing the invisible visible.
Just thank you for that. My next question is, how does psychological safety influence leadership development? One second. How does psychological safety influence leadership development, and what can leaders do in 2024 to build trust and encourage open communication with their teams?
Yeah. So, all right. So the first part of that question is, what role do leaders play in developing psychological safety? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So leaders will definitely make a big impact on psychological safety. Interestingly, though, and this is a little bit of the new paradigm kind of shift, I suppose, is it actually, the research and our research is indicating that it's actually more at the team level that is important rather than necessarily the leader. So while leaders, as I say, do create an impact, and we have a measure for that too. So if you're interested in knowing what are the things that I'm doing behaviorally that give me an indication of how I create psychological safety in my team, we've got a measure for that, which is cool. But it really comes down to, am I, as a leader, encouraging conversations? Am I creating time to have, and I always suggest, when you're using these, the 3-minute pulses, you can have these conversations in 15 minutes. It's not like, okay, let's have another workshop, let's come together, let's, get the tissues out. This is not fluffy stuff. This is, okay, here's the data. This is indicating what's going on for our team at the moment. We've got 15 minutes, or we've got 5 minutes. What do you guys notice in the results? And people are looking and they're going, oh yeah, we're not really showing much care or concern for each other at the moment. Okay, so what happens if we keep doing that? Well, chances are we're going to get hurt, or we're going to not meet our deadline, or whatever it may be. Okay, so are we all in agreement that we need to work on that? Yeah, we are. Okay, do your micro learning, come back, let's see what happens. And no doubt that needle will shift. So leaders have to be role modeling. Yeah. They have to look within. What is it maybe I'm doing or not doing that might indicate, this is important or not important. So there is that element of self-reflection that is just important for you as it is for any other member of that team. But for you to role model that and create a bit of space for these things to happen is critical.
Alrighty. So next question. How and it's my final question as well, so we can then look at some of the questions from our attendees. What are some effective ways for Australian organisations to measure psychological safety, and how can these insights support employee engagement and retention in the current market?
So I'm as you mentioned before, I'm a counselling psychologist. I've worked within organisations for years and lots of different ones. And I was the ones many years ago creating the yearly engagement surveys, which I still think have a lot of value. What I'll say though is it's too late by that point. You've already lost talent. There's already been issues that have been highlighted that you've had to deal with and triage throughout the year. So you need to find a measure that is going to not be cumbersome. It's something that has to be part of BAU, or it has to be something that is brief so that people see the value and they don't go, oh, survey fatigue. And it has to be done regularly, because psychological safety and psychosocial risk changes like that depending on what happens. So when we measure with people, you'll get like a dashboard, and you're able to kind of see the worm over time, and you can see our psychological safety or a risk has actually increased, or it's dropped, or it's been steady for a while. Something happened. And it's not about saying, oh, naughty you, team, for not being at a higher level. It's going, oh, we're not at a higher level than we want to be. What's happening? And that's what sparks the conversation. And this is where you get the assurance tick when it comes to the compliance, right? You have organisations and leaders and boards. They have a duty of care to make sure that they're measuring and mitigating risk. So by doing a regular measurement, you're meeting that criteria. By putting the solution into the hands of the people who it involves, which is everyone, not just putting it into the hands of the leaders or HR, that is the assurance tick. So we're equipping them with the skills and the knowledge of how to find their voices. Yeah. I think I deviated from your question, David. Sorry.
No, it's excellent. It's fully.
Oh, the other thing I will say, sorry, is if you want to do a psychosocial or a psychosocial audit, that's great too. They're a bit more chunky, but that's usually on a yearly basis. They're a lot more pricey, and I still recommend them. But that's one thing. You need a regular finger on the pulse all the time. Yeah, not just once a year, as things change.
Yeah, interesting. I do have some kind of questions on that, but I want to go to the chat.
Sure.
Because I want to get these questions answered. Alrighty, I'm just scrolling through all the microphones disabled. Video's not working, Dave. I got a lot of support from the everyone attending. Okay. So this is one from Kristen. How do we as leaders balance promoting psychological safety with the fact that we can't fix every problem that is raised? Some may even be just part of the type of company we work in, or pursue every idea that a team member has.
Yeah. So I couldn't hear the first one properly. Sorry, but the second question was, what do we do when we can't do every idea people have? Is that what you said?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, based on the type of company that they are. That they are.
Yeah. Well, raising ideas doesn't mean you have to do them. It's about being heard. It's about feeling safe to at least say it. Doesn't necessarily mean you got to do it. All right. So, leaders can preface this with, look, let's have a bit of I want to encourage innovation. I want to encourage collaboration, and I want to hear your ideas. And we need to have an environment or a team where we can, express some of those ideas, because it could be things that we've never even thought of before. Now, it doesn't mean that we have an endless supply of budget. It doesn't mean that we can do all of, action all of these ideas. But if we can enter this conversation with the intention of let's brainstorm and let's see what we come up with, and how we have this conversation is one of being open-minded, not one of closing and shooting down the ideas.
Yeah.
And so leaders, a great example for you is to go, I love the idea. Unfortunately, the budget's not going to be there. Keep that idea, guys, and let's keep this going, knowing that this is the budgetary, restraints that we've got here.
Mm-hmm.
That's an example.
Yeah.
And when you notice that things get shut down, lead by example, even when you do it. So if you come and go, I think I just shut that idea down too quickly. Sorry about that.
Absolutely.
Role model that.
Yep. Absolutely. And I'm sure even myself, I do that at times as well. I'm certainly very conscious of it, because that thing I said earlier on about we've tried that before kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's something you get in marketing a lot from various leaders and people that I've had throughout my career. And it's
some organizations are really conservative as well.
Yeah, exactly. My thing's always like, you tried it before, but you didn't do it right, or you didn't do it a certain way, or you didn't flesh out the idea fully. So my solution to that for my anytime team members that I manage is, anytime they put up their hand. So I think what you're saying is they need to be heard and they need to feel heard.
Yeah.
So I think, looking back at that question, based on the type of company it is, also the position, because it's ideas is a big part of marketing. It's maybe not in other departments. My thing is always, within my team anyway, is an idea isn't an idea until you've got costs and timings. That's always what I say to my team members, because that's how you start to think at an executive level. It's not just, we should try this. And it goes, well, cool, but how much is it going to cost? Actually put it in a miniature proposal, or at least have those bullet points ready.
And that's exactly right. And so with the solution part of measure, because the measure is one thing, but the solution part is, it gets into those exact things that you just talked about. So when I hear an idea, do I have a tendency to view things through the how it's not going to work lens? Or, when I'm raising idea, do I tend to do it in a forceful way that people tend to shut down? Or do I do it too passively and go, oh, it's probably not going to work? And, so the solution part gets the individual to really think about what their contribution is to creating safety within that whole team.
Excellent. Let's see some other questions. Just a comment from Michelle. There's lots of people are just focused on targets. They don't have the framework/skills to manage. Spoke about targets earlier on, and I'll just do one last one. You say that you can diagnose a team within 3 minutes on psych safety. What I'm wondering is, what is the one thing that we can do in our team to make a difference today?
Yeah. The one thing I would encourage you to do is work on connection, right? So when human beings are naturally like connection. Now, it runs on a continuum. Some people like really strong connection, and other people, might, they prefer a connection, but in a lesser degree. So encouraging people to build relationships is a fundamental part of psychological safety, right? So, knowing as a leader, how can I, help people? How can we personalize, the relationships and the person a little bit more? So, rather than just talking about work all the time, or and I'm not saying you need to go and, spill your whole life and, ask for that from other people either. But what are ways in which we can form connection, and, put that out to the team? And it could be, some of you would have done personality assessments and, bandied those around a little bit and gone, oh, you're an introvert, so am I, and let's talk about extrovert, and whatever it might be. I'm talking more than just having a barbecue. I'm talking about actually, developing a bit more of a deeper connection. Because if you think about relationships, the people that you're really close to, you're more inclined to speak up if you feel that you've got a relationship with someone and that it's a safe relationship. You're less inclined if you don't know the person, it's a stranger, and, or it doesn't feel safe. So the more that you can work on connection as a team, that's a great start.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty. I think so. I'll be following up with everyone and just via email. that's joined today. One thing, this is not really a question as such, but we got quite a focus on development at the moment, which we always do. We've recently did like a webinar with AGL, for example, and how we map their values to their competencies. I may have messed that up, but bear in mind, marketing guy. But and it was a really good webinar, and from a development point of view. What you mentioned, like the PSI can like work with like 360s. We were at the event last week, so in terms of how it slots in with traditional development technologies or methods, like what are some ways it works?
Sorry, the last bit you said what, sorry?
Just what are some ways that it works together?
Yeah,
with, like,
so
360 or other development plans, or
yeah. So if you, I mean, the way that we use the PSI and way that I encourage people and teams to use their PSI, it's something that is a regular measure that's team-based. So it measures the psychological safety within your team and psychosocial risk that's present within your team, and how you feel with interfacing teams. I recommend you use that regularly, and it's just such a beautiful tool, and it brings the conversation. And someone said it brings the elephant out in the room. It does it, but in a non-confrontational way.
Yeah.
Nice. It highlights it and it says, okay, what's here? And now let's get busy. I do advise it, leaders to, if you're interested in exploring this further, I do encourage you to do your own, we call it the PSI 360, which is, what is the psychological impact that I'm having on the people that I work with? And you're all familiar with 360s and know how those work. And that's usually once a year. And that can work in beautifully with your performance development plans as well. And it might help with your team KPIs as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just given the kind of the economy exceptions in at the moment, the development is kind of crucial to for sustainability for a lot of businesses, and we spoke a lot about productivity and increased revenue, profit, and whatnot off the back of increasing psychological safety. So
if you've got millennials as well, like one of the stats I was looking at, by 2025, I think 75% of our workforce is going to be with millennials, and many different generations. And it's interesting. I've gone from interviewing students to work with us to students interviewing us and saying, help me understand what the culture's like, what's the role clarity, I need to, so there's a lot more focus on what is going to give me my needs and help me develop my career in a safe way. So we kind of have to get on board with that early.
Nice. All righty, I'll leave it there. I do feel like we could continue to talk for ages. Always happy to do another one of these. So I just want to say thank you, Abby, for having us today. It was really great talking through all of that. Had a good night at the Gender Equality Awards last week with you, and I had the pleasure of watching you speak there. So it's been great been able to have a chat with you. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you everyone for joining. We've sent a follow-up email out with recording, and just feel free to sign up to the form in the email if you want to learn more about psychological safety and the PSI. Alrighty. Nice one.
All right. Thanks, David. All right.
Cheers,
take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.